Okay, welcome back. In today's episode, this is actually going to be more of the tech episode. So if you're interested in that, that's great. What I'm going to do today is talk through some of the settings and stuff I use when using this camera to take some of the wildlife photos I've been taking, as well as we're going to take a look at using this camera, probably with this lens, and some of the settings I would use with that. So this camera here is the Canon EOS R. It's a 32 megapixel camera. Depending on the settings, you can get, I think, like 5 frames a second out of it, up to 8 if you're using manual focus, but I'm not doing that. So basically it's about 5 frames a second at best, which is not fast. I mean, I got this camera for doing more landscapes and portraits and stuff, and it's great for that. It does work well, or it kind of works for doing some of these wildlife shots that I've been doing as well. And then this lens is the Sigma 100 to 400 5 to 6.3 DG. As I say, it's from Sigma. So I'll just go ahead and hopefully that focuses, but probably not. Again, Sigma 100 to 400. It's a variable aperture, which means as you zoom in, you do lose, I think basically it goes from a minimum aperture of 5 to 6.3. So that's at least one closing of the aperture. I use the lens hood on this lens and most lenses just to protect the lens. Also, if you did have harsh light, it's going to keep some of that contrast because you're not getting the bright sunlight shining directly onto the lens element, which will reduce some of the contrast. So today we've got a very overcast day, so that's not the issue. The only issue is just when you're swinging the camera around, making sure that your front element's protected. One of the other ways you can do that, obviously, is to use a filter. If you're going to do that, you would want to use what's normally referred to as a UV filter. But the reason I don't like them is you're then putting another piece of glass in front of your glass, and you're kind of reducing it to your poorest quality glass. So if you're using a cheap UV filter, unfortunately, that's kind of what's limiting your image. So in the past, I've not had much success with those types of filters, so I just don't use them anymore and instead opt for lens hoods. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a walk around and try to find some birds. For some reason right now there doesn't seem to be a lot. There usually is. In fact, they're usually bugging or interfering in with the videos while I'm making them. But that's not the case today for some reason, or at least right now. So we're going to take a walk around. We'll probably go back into the main yard and see if there are any birds there. And yeah, we'll see kind of where we go from there. But the idea is to get some pictures with this lens and this camera, and then switch to this camera and that lens, and we'll talk about the settings using with that, and just some of the differences. Once we've done that, we're going to go back inside. We'll take a look at 2 of the images, one from each camera, and just talk about the differences in the quality and the detail that we're getting out of them. Also, some of the benefits of using an APS-C camera versus a full frame camera, and obviously some of the benefits of the full frame camera. Okay, so while we're waiting for a few of those birds to come back, I'm using this camera right now. This is the EOS R, and I'm using shutter priority. So what I'm trying to do here is to use a reasonable shutter speed. So because I'm using a 400mm lens, I'm using at least 1/400th of a second, and I'm using auto ISO, so the camera is picking the ISO. When I was taking pictures just a second ago, it's taking them using about 600 speed ISO. So I'm just going to take a couple pictures here. And so it seems now that we're getting quite a few of the birds to come back, which is great. But because we already started taking pictures at the feeder, I think I'll just continue to do that so we've got similar pictures to use. Also, the focus method I'm using is continuous focus, and I'm using back button focus, and I'll be using both the same focus systems on both cameras. With Canon cameras, that's often referred to as, I believe, servo focus. Okay, so with the EOS R, I got a couple of photos that I like. Now, these wouldn't be like portfolio worthy images, but they're good enough to show the amount of detail and the settings and stuff that I would use when taking pictures with this camera. So what we'll do now is we'll switch these two cameras, we'll start taking pictures with that, and we'll use this camera to do the recording for the next little section here. So let's switch, let's do that. Okay, so I got this camera set up the same way now, the Sigma 100 to 400. It's in shutter priority. We're using, again, 1/400th of a second. Now, because this is an APS-C camera, and you're getting that 1.6 crop factor, you actually probably want to have a higher shutter speed, but to reduce camera shake. But I'm going to try to use the same shutter speed so we can get as good a comparison as I can, and we'll kind of see where it goes. Again, ISO is auto, so it's probably going to be about 600. Oh, actually this camera doesn't do stops the same way, so this one will probably be about 800 ISO, so be close. So we'll feed some birds, try to get them to come back, and then we'll take a couple of shots here. So one thing I'm noticing right away, because I haven't used this setup in a while, is that crop factor is really bringing the camera in a lot closer, so I might end up actually shooting around 300 millimeters on this lens. Okay, so I did actually get a couple images there that I like. Again, these aren't going to be portfolio quality photos, but that's not what we're doing today. The main focus of today is just to get out and to take some photos, but also to kind of just do this comparison of the two cameras. And again, one of the big advantages of the APS-C is that you're getting that 1.6 crop factor. So I ended up shooting those photos at 300 millimeters, but I'm getting just as close, or maybe even closer, or zoomed in closer than I would when I was using the EOS R. So something to keep in mind. But hands and stuff are getting cold. It's not extremely cold, but it's chilly enough. So gonna pack up the stuff. We'll go inside, make a cup of tea, and take a look at some of the photos. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the two images that we got, the one from the full frame camera, the EOS R, and the one from the APS-C camera, the T6s. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take a look at the quality of the images, and we'll start with the EOS R image, and then we'll move over to the T6s image. And from time to time you might hear the computer fan. Sorry, but the computer's working hard. Okay, so here's the first image. This is taken of a chickadee at the bird feeder like we had seen before. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the tone curve. I'm just adjusting the curves a little bit. I'm going to bring up the exposure just a little bit. I'm going to add some more contrast, a little bit of clarity. I'm going to add about 15% saturation, a little bit of vibrance. And I'm going to go into the white balance and just kind of get a feel for things. So it's probably a little too blue. And that's probably okay. So we're going to go with 58K. And then the part that we're most interested in is what was the detail that we were able to capture and how much noise do we get at the same time. So at this point we've got no additional noise correction and no additional sharpening. So it's looking pretty good. Actually, it's looking really good. So I'm going to go in and just add a little bit of sharpening. I'll pull out a little bit more detail. And for noise, I'm going to remove some. So I'm going to try 5 first. And that did a pretty good job, but I'm going to just bump it up to 8. And there we go. So that's basically where you could leave the edit with this. Because we've got a lot of detail in it, we can obviously do a lot of cropping. Right now we're looking at it 1:1 or 100%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a layer mask and just brighten up the face a little bit. The blacks get pretty dark on the chickadees, and there's not a lot we can do about that. So I'm just going to bring up the exposure a little bit. I'm going to just brush in this dark spot here. So sometimes what I would do too is brighten up the eye or brighten up the beak. In these photos I don't, or in this photo I don't think that that's needed. So I'm just going to go and start cropping. Because I got a lot of detail and a lot of resolution, I can do a lot of cropping. I could do like a really tight crop, something like that, which would look pretty good. So yeah, let's take a look at that. So that wasn't the plan. Let's see what 200% looks like. So at this point, this is 2 times resolution, and we can see that there's some loss in detail at this point. Trying to print something that was cropped in this far would not be good, but this would work. As I said when I was taking the pictures, I didn't feel that any of these would be portfolio quality pictures, just because of the background and stuff like that. Now with the EOS R at 400 millimeters, and because we're a close distance using a full frame camera, the background's just gone. You can't see any specific detail in the background. So that's really nice. Right now I'm just going into levels and just trying to find basically a black point and a white point. And that is that for that photo. So yeah, pretty happy with that. No problems with the image coming out of the EOS R. No surprise there. It's kind of my go-to camera. So okay, so here's the photo taken with the T6s. First thing we'll do is we'll just jump in and take a look at the detail. So we're seeing pretty good detail, a little bit more noise, but I think that that's something we can definitely manage with the software here. So we'll go back into tones, we can pull the darks down, lift up the highlights just a little bit, bring the general exposure up, add some contrast, a little bit less. I'm going to do kind of the standard edit that I do with these 2 cameras. So next thing is white balance. Now currently it looks too blue. That's too yellow. So bring that down and try 5000. Still a little blue. So I think we're gonna go 5150. That looks okay. Again, I'm just gonna pull in a little layer mask here. Color in the blacks and get the eye. And because I did it in the other one, I'm gonna pull it in here too. So I'm just gonna bring up the exposure on this a little bit. Yeah, that's probably good there. I like the little water droplets on his beak there. I think that's pretty cool. So we'll go into detail here. We'll do kind of the same thing. We're gonna go in and use a radius of 20 and an amount of 20. Now you can go way overkill on this. And you can get an image that looks like this. Definitely not good. So we're gonna bring that back down to 20. Again, the detail that's coming out of this is good. I'm happy with it. Just throw in a little bit of noise reduction. So again, that's not enough, so I'm gonna bump it up to 8. And yeah, I'm okay with that. That looks good. So, I mean, you could probably do a tight crop on this one as well. Of course, definitely want to keep the tail feathers in. And because it's a bird, we want to give him a little bit more room to fly away. So we'll crop it to the bottom there so he's got more room in the upper part, as well as the direction he's looking in. And I think that's looking pretty good. So we'll go ahead and develop that, which is just how this software works. If you're using Photoshop or something else, your Lightroom for example, you don't have to do this step. And of course there comes the computer fans because it's working a little bit hard there. So again, we're just gonna go and check the levels, look for a little black point, look for a white point, but I don't want to push the white in there. Just gonna see the difference that made. Yeah, I like that. Okay, I'll go ahead and export that one as well. And then we'll just take one last look at the specs that were used for each of them. So we'll just do that really quick while I'm exporting this photo. It looks pretty good. Just in general, I'm seeing a little bit more noise in the background. The far background has got a little bit more detail in it. Now it's not a lot, but there is a little bit more, and I'm talking like up in this area in here. And that's just because it's taken at 300 millimeters or close to, instead of the 400 millimeters that I used on the EOS R. And again, you're getting a crop version of it instead of the full format that you're getting from the full frame. So just doing a quick comparison here. Make this one full screen as well. So I mean, you can see a little bit of difference in these two photos, but honestly, if they were put up side by side on a wall printed the same size, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, I don't think. So one last thing to do just before we're done here is just check the final settings here. So I'm going to pull that up. Okay, so let's just take a look at the settings from the EOS R first. We've got all the pixel dimensions there and stuff. That's not really what we're interested in. So yeah, it was taken at 6.3, which is the minimum aperture at that focal distance, 1/400th of a second, and ISO 800. Okay, so same thing with the picture from the T6s. Got the pixel dimensions here, and you'll notice it's actually relatively the same pixel dimensions as the EOS R with that heavy crop on it. So yeah, this is only about 200 pixels larger than the image taken with the EOS R, even though the EOS R had that heavy crop put on it. So essentially you're getting to choose your APS-C crop factor after you've taken the photo. Now I don't know if we did crop it by 60%, but maybe. I'm not really sure. Probably not. Probably only like 45% or less. Anyways, so the settings for this one was, again, the minimum aperture at the focal distance 6.3. It was taken at 1/500th of a second. Now I did that because when I was reviewing some of the images earlier, I was noticing a little bit more blur and camera shake. And that's again because when you're looking at the focal distance here, you actually got to keep in mind the crop factor. So we've got focal distance of 315 millimeters, but when we apply the crop factor, you take the 315, multiply that by 1.6, and it's actually 504 millimeters. So based on the length or the adjusted focal length, I was actually using the right shutter speed for that, using the reciprocal rule, which is where you take the length of the focal distance that you're using, so in this case closest is 500 millimeters, and basically you put that under 1, so you get a 1/500th of a second. So makes sense, but that did mean that the ISO had to be bumped up to 1000, and you can notice a little bit difference in the grain and texture. So I could have applied more noise correction to this image, but then the trade-off is you're losing some of that detail. So it's a balance act. Overall, I would say really there's no difference between these two images. I think either one of these cameras is able to capture enough detail to do wildlife photos. The bigger constraint with both of those cameras is the shutter speed, or frames per second, sorry. That's printed up on a wall. Yeah, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. I actually do kind of like this picture. It's grown on me a little bit. I think the other one would have too if I didn't have the bird feeder in the background. That part I don't like, but other than that, I think it's an equally good image. I like the detail that's coming out in the feathers here. Yeah, can't complain. Same with this one. I love the little bit of snow that's just stuck on his beak there. Yeah. Anyways, this has been a long video. I went back and forth, waffled on quite a bit. So if you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe so you can see more. If you didn't like the video, that's okay. Maybe you got something out of it. Maybe it's not something you want to see again. That's okay. If that's the case, let me know. Maybe there is something that would be more interesting that we can take a look at next time. Okay, that's it from this one. Bye for now.